أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين الشفيع ذنوبنا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا بالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم الأجمعين إلى يوم الدين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربي شرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us yet another opportunity to be together. Wherever you are listening in, we thank Allah for this moment that we have to be able to share a few thoughts. What we want to talk about today might be a bit sobering, but nevertheless, it is something very, very, very important. Of course, we are all in this very difficult situation at the moment. Hardly there goes a day by that we do not hear of a demise either within the community or the extended family or friends or and it's a very, very difficult time. And what this has actually done is perhaps we have become more conscious or a bit more aware of our own mortality. We all know of it, of course, subconsciously, since we begin to have some kind of awareness. But now, as we see it around us so frequently and so widely, perhaps instead of being subconscious, it now comes to our conscious level. And of course, we are all familiar with the verse, Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, every soul shall taste death. And Imam Ali alayhi salam said, La shay'a astaqu min al-ajal. There is nothing truer than death. Other than that, we can see, if we were to observe around us, we see signs all the time. We only need to look at the seasons changing, the leaves falling from the trees, the ground that was once lush and green, covered with flowers, the flower that withered away, at times covered with snow, night turning into day, day into night. If we look at ourselves, we will see eventually our black hair turning gray or white. We will see our skin wrinkling. Backs will be bending. Muscle, we will lose mass, muscle mass. And we see people in front of our eyes having made this transition already. There is no family somehow, some way that has not been affected by mortality at some point. I'm not talking about now only. Yet, despite all of this, we remain unsure. How again Imam Ali alayhi salam said, La ghaiba aqrabu min al-maut. There is no absent thing closer to us than death. We find in an amazing tradition from Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, Luqman al-Hakim giving advice and admonition to his son, and he said, My son, If you have at all any doubt about your impending death, then remove sleep from you. You can't do it. If you have any doubt about rising up again after death, then avoid waking up after your sleep. You can't do it. So if you ponder over these two things, you will realize that life is in the hand of someone else, that sleep is like death and awaking is like rising after death. Subhanallah. Which one of us can go without sleep? Once we sleep, which one of us, however much we like to sleep, at some point we have to wake up. And you know, of course, the connotation and the link between sleep and death. Again, Imam Ali said, Nafas al-mar'i khutahu ila ajlihi. A man's breath is his step towards his death. There is a beautiful story, I believe from the Mathnavi, that Rumi puts about the great Prophet Sulaiman. He held daily audiences with his subjects, and they would approach him with their issues, etc., and he would give solutions. One day it so happens that a man in complete distress falls on the knees before the great Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam. The Prophet asked him, "What is your problem?" He said, "Just short a while ago, I was crossing the road. I saw the angel of death. He glared at me with such disdain. I am sure that he is coming from me. Please save me." The angel of death takes his orders only from God and follows them diligently. "What do you want me to do for you?" Nabi Sulaiman says to him. He says, "My life is in your hands. Tell the wind to carry me to Hind, to India," which was a known place, which was far, where I will be safe. At Sulaiman's bidding, the east wind carried this distraught man to Hind. The next day, Sulaiman catches a glimpse of the angel of death among the crowd. He asks him, "Why do you frighten my subject, a servant of God, with such a gaze yesterday? What wrong did he do?" He says, "I was just surprised. I did not look at him like that at all. I was astonished to see him here when God had commanded me to take his life today in India, in Hind. And I was wondering, how would he be able to reach Hind in just one day?" Subhanallah. Look also at the great Sulaiman, how his soul is taken. He is not even afforded the ability to sit down or to lie down. Other than that, look at the mighty, how they have lived. We don't need to refer to very long, bad as well as good people. We have in our living times seen past dictators being dragged out from holes in the ground, from sewage pipes. Even godly saints had to depart. I many times say this to my children: observe the Quran, for a great deal of it is of the past people and what we would call history. Why? Why is there so much content of the Quran relating to what has happened in the past? People could say this is, from before, tales from before. These are not just fables and entertaining stories, but crucially, it is so that the living can take lessons. لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِلْأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ مَا كَانَ حَدِيثًا يفترى ولكن تصديق الذي بين يديه وتفصيل كل شيء وهدى ورحمة لقوم يؤمنون. There is in their stories instructions for men endued with understanding. It is not a tale invented, but a confirmation of what went before it, a detailed exposition of all things, and a guide and a mercy to any such that believe. The Quran itself is saying this. أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَيَنْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Do they not travel through the earth and see what was the end of those that went before them? Learn lessons from past events for future events, because they are similar to one another. Again, the Master, Ali ibn Abi Talib. We get so caught up in the day-to-day running of our lives that such things just sit in our subconscious mind. We don't really have the time, or should I say, make time to just sit, reflect, ponder, think, switch off. This whole thing about mindfulness now, what is this? To be mindful of the moment. Because we are so caught up in the moment that we are not even mindful of the moment. And of course, I say this to myself. Young people nowadays, I have children who are young. I'm thinking, when do they actually have time to think? They are constantly switched on. When do they actually just separate for a moment? To think, look up. We are always looking down. When COVID came, this pandemic first came, and we began to realize its seriousness, we were stunned and horrified, were we not? Of course, rightly so, we have not seen something like this in our lifetimes. However, slowly we began to adapt. To this new reality, we began to adjust ourselves accordingly. Of course, pliability, resilience, adaptability are very necessary traits and needed for our survival and progress. But they should be used constructively, not as a means for stagnation, and certainly not for regressing. There is a famous story that Al-Ghazali once told, and you might have heard this. The story of the man walking in the jungle. A roaring lion comes in front of him. The man runs as fast as he can. He notices a well. He jumps into the well to escape from the lion. As he is falling inside the well, he grabs onto the rope and saves himself. The man is relieved. However, when he looks down in the well, he sees there is a great snake, Allahu Akbar, at the bottom of the well. Its jaws are wide open, waiting for him. And you can just picture this. The man looks up and he sees two mice nibbling away at the rope that he's clinging onto. My gosh. There is a black mouse and a white mouse, both chewing away. And the scary lion is prowling outside, roaring. The man's heart is pounding. He's wondering, how am I going to escape from this? At that moment, he notices a honeycomb in front of him, and which has delicious honey dripping from it. He sticks his finger into the honey and puts it inside his mouth. It is so delicious, and for a moment, he forgets all about the lion, the snake, and the mice chewing away at the rope. Ghazali explains that the lion is like the angel of death, which is always looming around us. The snake is like the grave, which all humans will face. The black mouse and the white mouse were like the day and the night, which are always nibbling away at life, which is the rope. The honey, you have guessed it, I'm sure, is like this world with which its momentary sweetness makes us forget about death and the life to come. I've used this example many times before, but quickly I will just give it to you. The average day or the normal day consists of how many hours? 24. The average life, if we're just to say for argument's sake, is 90 years. The average person in an average life of 90 sleeps how many hours a day? 8 hours, let's say. So in a life of 90, a person has slept for 30 years. Allahu Akbar. 30 years have gone to sleep only. So there are 60 years left. Out of those, he's working or engaging in earning his livelihood. Another 8 hours. Another 30 years have gone. 30 years are left. Up till the age of 14, 15, 16, 17, we are just engaged in, the here and now only. And you will just keep on subtracting. At the end of the day, you are left with a handful of years only at your disposal, where hopefully your mind is not preoccupied with other things. Hopefully. Upon which not only this life depends, but the hereafter also depends. Death is a reality which all humans believe in. However, it is also a reality which most of us like to keep out of our minds. There is no doubt about fear of death. We all know this. It doesn't require any evidence. The question is, what is the reason for the fear? Why do we actually fear it? And if we look closer, we see that it possibly comes down to a few reasons. That people don't have the correct insight. We consider death as eternal destruction of ourselves and the end of existence. Consequently, it is only but natural to fear and abhor that. We have instinct within us of eternality, of foreverness, for permanence. It's one of the strongest natural instincts that we have, and we've talked about this. Whenever we have a natural instinct, there has to be an external correspondent to it. And that external correspondent somehow has to be a positive correspondent. So of course it is only evident that a person would want to protect himself from anything that is leading towards his destruction. And death in this view is greater and more pain-inflicting than anything, because not only is it destruction, but it is severing of everything that man has attached value to in this life with. Possessions, positions, family. That's one reason. Another one is, it's a very unfamiliar path, new unfamiliar path. Although we may at times have gone on uncertain paths, but we may have been somewhat familiar with them. However, this path is both new and unfamiliar. Therefore, we are greatly hesitant and anxious, especially because even before, if we have traveled on an unfamiliar path, we can navigate away and return back. Here, whoever has gone on this path has never navigated back or returned back, other than by the will of God, of course. Another one is lack of preparation. Some people have accepted the reality and are aware of the religious insights and have learned about the stations of the journey, etc., but despite this have some kind of fear. It's not due to the other reasons that we've mentioned, but because not making available the provisions necessary for undertaking this journey. We were engrossed with the here and now, and we did not think about this, although we knew about it. Someone asked Imam Hassan alayhi salam, why do we dislike death? Why don't we like it? Imam Hassan alayhi salam replied, because you have ruined your hereafter and built your world. And you dislike to move from a constructed place to a place of ruin. It makes so much sense. You ruined that.
You built a ruin there and you built a palace here, you could think of it. Who would like to leave the palace towards a ruin? The Quran strongly urges us to consider this and make preparations for tomorrow. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu attaqullah wal tanzur nafsun ma qaddamat lighadin wattaqullah innallaha khabirun bima ta'malun. You who believe, be mindful of God and let every soul consider carefully what it sends ahead for tomorrow. Be mindful of God, for God is well aware of everything you do. This kind of fear, where people are lacking preparedness and the absence of provisions, often occurs with people who already have belief. It may not always be fear of death, but instead fear for not possessing sufficient means. Imam Ali alayhi salam beautifully expressed when asked about preparing for death, he said, it is to fulfill obligations, refrain from the forbidden and adopt good moral traits, and then to not care whether one should fall onto death or death should fall onto him. Subhanallah. By Allah, the son of Abu Talib is not concerned whether he falls onto death or death falls onto him. It is like he has summarized the whole gist or essence of life. Because to fulfill obligations is, of course, the foremost obligation is to God, to creatures, to ourselves. Yes? And how aptly the Quran also states this. الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْغَفُورُ. Who has created life and death that he may try you, which of you is best in conduct. So of course we should try to live our way to fulfill our obligations with regard to ourselves, creatures, and the Creator. And very importantly, lead a meaningful life. Hopefully quickly we will discuss this, touch upon this in our second sermon. However, whatever we have fear or not, mortality is a universal law, acceptance of which will not change the law itself, or rejection of this reality will not change the law. Al-Mawtu Babul Akhirah. However, in Islam, death is not considered an end to existence. Alhamdulillah. It is a passage which takes us from this world to the hereafter. Death is a door to the hereafter. The Master, Ali ibn Abi Talib, has said. The Prophet also said, death is the first stage in the stages of the hereafter and the last stage from the stages of the world. My son, know that you have been created for the next world and not for this world, and for annihilation and not to stay, for death and not for life. You are in a transient place, a place which is a path to the hereafter. This is part of the wasiyah that Imam Ali alayhi salam gave to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So what is this? Is it destruction, annihilation, non-existence? Or is it change and shifting from one world to another? This is something that humans have been puzzled with. The Quran has its own explanation. It has used derivations from the word tawaffi in this connection, which means to receive in full. This is what Allama Mutahhari in Man and Universe elaborates. 14 verses in Quran have used this expression. And these verses show that from the Quranic point of view, death means gathering and receiving into custody. In other words, at the time of death, the human being gets into the custody of the divine authorities who receive him in full. So from this we can infer that death does not mean annihilation and obliteration. It is a shifting from one place to the other. What actually constitutes the human being and the self is not the body and its physical systems, which decompose What really constitutes the person is his personality and ego, which has been described by the Quran as the self, or the nafs, or the soul. Another word that is also used in Urdu is intikal, which also means relocation, transfer, and change. Someone asked Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam about death, and he said, for a mu'min it is like taking off dirty clothes, undoing shackles and heavy chains, and changing into the finest and most scented of clothes. It is the smoothest of mountable animals and the most comforting abodes. And for the kafir, it is like taking off fine clothes, transferring from comfortable abodes into the dirtiest and roughest of clothes, and the most terrifying of stations, and the greatest of punishments. So the first thing we should strive to do is to come to terms with our finite worldly existence and mortality. This is the first step. Then consciously accept it. And then finally work on and strive to possibly embrace it. For embracing death is coming to terms with the hereafter. Minha khalaqnakum wa fiha nu'idukum wa minha nukhrijukum taratan ukhra. From the earth did we create you, and unto it we shall return you, and from it we shall bring you out once again. And embracing the hereafter is ultimately meeting the Creator. How can you ignore God when you were lifeless and He gave you life, when He will cause you to die and then resurrect you to be returned to Him? Surah number 2, verse 28. When all of us will stand before God, يَوْمَ يَقُمُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, a day when mankind will stand before the Lord of the worlds. When the call comes, we have to ask ourselves, how do we want to go? It's a very, very sobering question. Do I want to go kicking and screaming and shouting and clinging on? Or do I want to go in a different way? But we leave those who do not accept to meet us to wander blindly in their excesses. Or do I want to go with arms open, embracing it, accepting it as a blessing from the Lord, and know that you are to meet Him, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and give good tidings to those who believe. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa ala ali baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We quickly want to just conclude. We must learn from mortality, from death. For the secret of life is hidden in the message that it has to teach us. It shows us that we are not our own masters, that our stay on earth is only temporary. However, that this is the arena and the stage and the opportunity to befriend God. Inshallah, we want to talk about this at some point, and lead a life measured in quality over quantity, a life of meaning over a life of substance, a life of truly being alive before dying. Death, actually, if we allow it, will teach us how to live. It's amazing. I've mentioned this before. Quickly I will just, and you can look it up yourselves. In her book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, a palliative care nurse has revealed the most common regrets from her patients. Please look it up in your time. You can just put it up, the top 5 regrets of the dying. And you will see. It's quite, well known on the internet. So I will just briefly mention them. She said that nearly all of her patients were more concerned with the relationships they had built with others and being truly happy than they were with money, fame, or success. Of course, people wanted to get their financial affairs in order if possible, but in the end it came down to love and relationships. So I'm going from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. Yes, I'm not going to go to explain it because time is running short. I wish I had let myself be happier. 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. 2, I wish I didn't work so hard. And this was nearly every male patient had this regret. Kids growing up, those who are fathers will know of this. And 1, the first and the most one, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. This was the most common regret of all. Ware found that most people had not realized even half of their dreams and knew that it was because of the choices they had made. We don't always have control over our circumstances or situations. True. We don't. We are helpless, many a times. But most of the time we will have control of what choices we make in those circumstances. We can't control circumstances, but we can control our reaction most of the times in that particular circumstance, or how our interaction with that circumstance will be. As we have commemorated or celebrated the birthday of Lady Fatima, you can just see in this short life of hers what a life she actually lived. If people had lifetimes, they may not have. How she chose to lead her life. And it is a great example for all of us to learn from. It was a life that was led and lived in utter quality, even though quantitatively it was just a very short life. And I want to end with this from Ali Shariati when he comes to a point when he wants to describe Lady Fatima. And he said, I wish to say Fatima was the daughter of the great Khadija, but I sense this would not fully describe her. I wanted to say she's the daughter of Muhammad, but I sense this would not fully describe her. I wish to say Fatima is the wife of Ali, but I sense this would not fully describe Fatima. I wish to say she is the mother of Hassan and Hussein, but I sense this would not fully describe Fatima. I wish to say Fatima is the mother of Zainab, but I still sensed this would not fully describe Fatima. No, all of these are true, and none of them is Fatima. And he finally concludes, Fatima is Fatima. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten our hearts to learn from her illustrious life, to take lessons from what is all around us. And can we conclude to recite the Surah Fatiha for all of those blessed souls that have gone before us and all of those who are in difficulty and in illness. Fatiha. Bismillah.